Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and there it is. We have an announcement of when we'll be seeing patch 9.1 over on the PTR. This is quite exciting. This is good news. For all of you guys who were wondering when 9.1 was going to get here, we just put up a video yesterday, and it's funny that we haven't to do another video back to back talking about 9.1. We're going to have it available on the PTR for all the testing in just 2 weeks. In this video, I want to talk about some of the things I really want to see and some of the things I really think Blizzard should focus on. Important things that might make this patch a patch a lot of us have been waiting for. These are the key things that Blizzard needs to address in order to make Shadowlands great. This expansion has had a really strong start, and a lot of people were having fun at the very beginning, but now it is time to kick it into high gear and make sure the content of patch 9.1, first major patch of Shadowlands, is great. So let's take a look at some of the things that I really think that they should focus on for patch 9.1. Now that we know that the patch 9.1 is going to be here in 2 weeks, it does give us a little bit more of an idea of when Blizzard will be releasing, so that's something we can cover off the bat. We don't have an exact date, but generally we could take a look at previous expansions of World of Warcraft, anything post-Legion, because Legion was on a strict 77-day schedule. Something similar to Battle for Azeroth or expansions prior to Legion in terms of the content releases. It looks like it could be a late June, potentially middle of July, maybe early August, but of course it could be as early as May or as late as September. The factors that will determine how early this patch can come out is how much testing does Blizzard do, how thorough are they, and how many people participate in the testing. But at least we have some sort of a ballpark date, so it looks like it is going to be sometime this summer, the release of this patch. Something for all of you guys that are waiting for this patch to pay attention to is release dates and updates for other games, as Blizzard usually likes to have some of their big releases around the same time other games do. No matter how big Blizzard is in terms of the MMO giant that it has become, it always likes to shiv the other competitors as best as it can with a release about like 2 weeks before someone else's major release. So be on the lookout for other games releases and other titles releases in a similar genre as MMOs, but also in other popular titles as well. So let's take a look at exactly what Blizzard needs to do in order to make patch 9.1 great. I have polled you guys recently, and a lot of you guys have agreed all together unanimously that you want to see some great class changes. Blizzard needs to make some great class changes in patch 9.1, or at least start taking steps for a variety of different specs and playstyles in order to make them better than ever before. Shadowlands came out without a brand new class. As most expansions go, usually there is a new one, or at least there's a new class every other expansion, but Shadowlands, going off of the heels of Battle for Azeroth, didn't do that. And honestly, at the time, people were upset, but I thought to myself, probably not a good idea to create yet another class that's just as unfinished as the rest of these. We were coming off of BFA losing our Azerite gear, Legendary Cloak, corruptions, things that literally made our classes play, and without those things we were a shell of our former selves. Blizzard decided with Shadowlands to start adding things that classes used to have from back in the day in order to give more flavor, and also some classes have gotten awesome reworks, like Shadow Priest is a class I keep coming back to as a class that have gotten great setup. It brought back DP from the good old days. Void Form, as for community suggestion, became a cooldown. Then they even changed their mastery and even named it after inspiration of a classic talent that they had from back in the day. So all these changes culminated into the spec going from kind of like a car without tires, wheels, doors, or really part of the engine missing, to an actual full playable spec that could stand on its own without any of the corruptions, any of the Azerite gear, that could hold its own in combat. To name an example, and I don't want to bash on anybody playing survival, but survival would be one of those classes that I think needs some sort of a rework, or in my opinion could definitely benefit from one. But just using it as an example, not trying to bash on anyone playing survival. Survival is a simple builder spender spec that a lot of Battle for Azeroth classes ended up being. You have a way to generate focus, spend focus, a damage over time ability, and a cool AoE. The AoE for the spec, I love. The grenades are awesome, and things like Chakram can be very interesting. It gives a little bit of a different playstyle in terms of what it brings to AoE. But I think stuff like maybe Chakram could totally be baseline for the spec, or maybe part of the spec or baked into the spec in some way. It's a fun ability to press, but it's something you have to choose in talents, and it's just not as competitive in the row. Or we have talents that are so dominant in the row that eventually, with enough haste, you are going to be playing it no matter what. Mungus Bite. And Mungus Bite was weird in Battle for Azeroth, where eventually you had so much haste and the right gear set up with Azerites, you basically never put up Serpent Sting. It was not worth putting up Serpent Sting ever on your enemy, unless it was maybe a proc from talents. So baseline ability was literally worth not pressing because it was negative DPS compared to literally slamming your head on Mongoose Bite. And I'm not a huge fan of playstyles where you literally ignore certain aspects of your abilities. There are some aspects where maybe based on your talents, you change your rotation slightly. Maybe there's certain abilities you press on a single target, 2 target, but not on like 8 targets. For survival instead, it depends on what your gear setup, how much haste do you have, what talents are you running, where certain abilities come online and others literally came offline. Then survival, like many other classes, have really bad masteries that are just not good. They're not worth stacking into, and they don't really offer any interesting gameplay either. So there's probably some things survival could probably benefit from if you were to take aspects of the original survival. The black arrow, the explosive shot, the procs that you had for those abilities, how it was very heavy on sustained damage and was able to spread poisons very easily to enemies. I like the thing with the grenade that it has. Chakrams, super fun. Certain talents are really cool when you weave together, but a lot of them just become so dominant or so lackluster the whole time. No matter how much gear or what setup you're running, you're almost never running certain talents and always running others. So that's the stuff they fixed with Shadow Priest. They made dots matter in terms of just not the damage itself, but they allowed procs off of dots. They took away a lot of the RNG. Instead of making abilities work off of crits, they work off of other ability uses. They changed the talents, so now there's a lot more talents to run, and while not all of them are competitive right now, they definitely could be depending with better stats. Or maybe even in very specific situations that could also be really good as well. The bulk of you guys were looking towards class changes, and so do I for patch 9.1. Then we got the endgame content. For Mythic Pluses, I would love to see a really cool seasonal affix. I like Prideful. I think Prideful was awesome. Defeating this mob gave your group a buff, and you use the buff to make the dungeon easier. I want to see more stuff like this. I don't want to see things like Season 1 Battle for Azeroth Infected, where you have these mobs inside of Trashback that you basically just want to skip. I like affixes that make you want to do the dungeon and play the content, rather than affixes where you want to avoid the content. And certain affixes like Season 1 and Season 3 of BFA were the ones where you avoided the content, where Season 2 and Season 4 of BFA, as well as Season 1 of Shadowlands, were the ones where you played with content. I feel like raiding and Mythic Pluses are 2 legs of endgame content, so I'm hoping Blizzard considers some kind of a gearing purpose for Mythic Pluses and allows Mythic Plusers to actually be able to get some Mythic level raid gear. Some people do want Mythic Pluses and that's all they do is M+. Some people only raid, and others only PvP. And I feel like Blizzard should really take a look at all 3 of them as fundamental different legs of the expansion to stand on and allow players different ways of gearing, getting the same item level, or maybe even gear like dungeon gear is good in dungeons, raid gear is good in raids, PvP gear is good in PvP. Speaking about PvP, I'm hoping there's more updates on classes and legendaries in terms of some of the broken things that are going on. There's a plethora of things we can discuss in terms of what playstyles are looking crazy. And I think a lot of it is Blizzard trying to wait until classes catch up with the scaling, as some classes scale really well early on, others scale better towards the end game. So maybe a lot of that will be ironed out with scaling, but there are some broken combos with how legendaries or certain playstyles or certain covenants work in terms of PvP. Some of the things you could do for PvP is maybe have gear scaling. They talked about it before, and I'm actually kind of excited now about potentially having PvP gear only good in PvP, where it scales up in item level if you are inside of PvP combat. I think it'll make it easier for raiders and dungeoneers to not want to have to do PvP if they don't want to, and if you just want to do PvP, you'll have the best gear for the content. Finally, conduits, soulbinds, and covenants. There's going to be a lot more systems that Blizzard is going to be addressing in patch 9.1, and I just kind of want to let them take the wheel for a second just to see what they end up doing. But the one thing I like Blizzard doing is allowing players and making changes with covenants to allow players to pick the class covenant combos they really want to play. While not perfect, they've done a pretty good job at narrowing the gaps between covenants, to the point where I am very excited to go on my alts and reroll certain covenants and not feel like I'm just going like a minus 1000 DPS loss just for changing a covenant. They are getting a lot closer, and Blizzard is getting better at it. There are some things like Druids and Night Fae, especially as a Boomkin or a Feral, that are just so good that it's really difficult to justify going any other covenant, but there are less of those examples and more examples where players can actually have some choices nowadays. So the more steps they take in that direction, the happier I'll be, but I do want to see more stuff they'll do with covenants and soulbinds. But that's going to be some of the stuff that I want to see for patch 9.1. Let me know your thoughts. What do you want to see for patch 9.1? If you enjoyed this video, give them a like and subscribe. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another one.